The Art of Aging Unapologetically. And it built into that idea is that there is this nice, neat way we're meant to age. And for me, growing up as the daughter of a people pleaser in the South, it was about being nice. It was about being what people wanted me to be, about fitting in, about looking the right way, acting the right way. And at some point, you kind of look at that and go, well, screw that. Let's do something different here. Let's figure out what I want for myself. And so I coined the name Aging Unapologetically. And I love this passage from a woman named Diane Sawyer. She is an author. She's not the Diane Sawyer we're familiar with, and of the TV newscaster. She says, you have to start by changing the story you tell yourself about getting older. And in essence, the minute that you do that and you prioritize that, then you've got a whole different story. I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. I like to tell stories, and looking at stories is the context for me in which I think we can come to how we view ourselves and how we want to age. So what is an aging unapologetically mindset? I'm going to go through really kind of what it is, the effects of negative thoughts about our aging and how that impacts us. And then in the third situation, how we rewrite our stories and our lives. So we'll kind of talk about each one of those and have a few thoughts on where to go. And then, as I said, and Elaine has said, and when we're done, we can have whatever kind of conversation you'd like to have about that. So what does it mean to age unapologetically? We are trained and told that we should wear dresses a certain length. We shouldn't show arm flab. Older women can't show cleavage. We're best off dyeing our hair. We are given this message all over the place in the ads, in the shows we watch, even in conversation with our own acquaintances, that there is a way we are meant to age. And like that woman in the little box there on the screen, the ideas that society throws at us as women, not as men, because men kind of get a pass on this, boxes us in. We feel like, and we're made to feel ashamed of sort of doing what we want. There's that old phrase, she's let herself go. And Frances McDormand's sort of a perfect example of that. She no longer caters to, she's a movie actress, actor. She no longer caters to that notion of looking well-groomed and made up. She showed up at some big gala lately in tennis shoes. She's doing what she wants. She's living a life that's true to her. And there's a lot of freedom in doing that, but there's also a challenge. I mean, you will have people say to you, oh, you should do this differently. You would look so much better if you just put on some makeup. Or if have you ever thought about getting your eyes lifted? There's the comments that come in that can keep us from going there. But I think there's freedom when we make that decision to stop listening, to decide that this is what we want to do. Aging unapologetically could be as simple as asking yourself, what is it I desire? Not what is expected of me, but what would I like in this moment? And I do that sometimes on and off during a day. If something a writing teacher at a retreat suggested to us, she said, as you walk out of the door, ask yourself, what do I want to do now? Where do I want to write? How do I want to show up? What do you want? And that, I think, is a nice way to step into thinking about what we would like to do and what is really focused on us. Because in a way, I think to age unapologetically is to center our own selves. And it is to change the narrative. We are changing that story about how older women are supposed to show up. I've been told that I should cut my hair. It's not very attractive for an older woman to have long hair. It was suggested by a man I was going out with that I should dye my hair, that gray wasn't very appealing either. All these little things that come back at us that say, here's what you should do. And those are a challenge. But if we can take those steps to start to change our own narrative, and we begin to accept who we are, and we'll talk about this in the next bit, but accepting where we are in this given moment with our age, um, as opposed to fretting about it. You can go both ways. You can worry about what you've lost. You can worry about where you don't feel you fit in with the average older woman, whatever that age might be, or you can just accept. And the accept means to let go. Stress drops a little bit, and then you're open to new ideas if you abandon what feels like a really narrow box for you. Um, Becca Levy is a professor at Yale University who did research at Harvard Medical School, and she's just written a book called Breaking the Age Code: How Your Beliefs About Aging Determine How Long and How Well You Live. And the book is fascinating. She lived in Japan for a while and began to look at the way people there treat their elders, with reverence, with love, as people with wisdom to be looked up to be included. And so she began to do research. And this quote sort of sums up really what she's saying. She found that the older people who had a more positive feeling about aging performed better, both physically and cognitively, than those who held more negative connotations. And people who felt more positive about their age were able to recover from severe disability. They remembered better, they walked faster, which I think is kind of fascinating, and they even lived longer. And her ideas are based around trying to look at the thoughts we hold, not only about people out in the world, but about ourselves and how they impact our lives. So, what is the impact of having these negative thoughts about our aging? One of the things that she has shown, and that I see in my own life as well, is that when we have negative thoughts about it, when we dread our age, or we're complaining about it, or it feels awful to us, or we feel older than we think we are, studies have shown that people who said that their age, they felt younger than they were, tended to reap more benefits than those people who said they felt older than their number of years. If we feel negatively about aging, it impacts our physical health, it impacts our emotional well-being, and it impacts our longevity. We actually live longer when we can take a better approach about life and our age. So what I would like for you to do, if you don't mind, if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil, jot this down. If not, just think about it in your head. Write down the first 5 things, a word or a phrase, that comes to mind when you think of an old person. Just take a second. I don't mean this to be long. Okay, does anybody want to share a word they put down or thought of?
First word that came to me was free.
Free. Okay. Well, that's a good one. What Levy found is when she did this with her students, that the first time they did that, they came up with words like cane, wrinkled, stooped. They had negative words. That their perception, their immediate quick thing was, this is what I'm seeing. Now, think of a person who you either know personally or you see on a public stage somehow, but about whom you think positively, who you think is aging in a way that's inspiring or fascinating or whatever. And think about 5 things that come to mind when you think about that person. I picked Emma Thompson when I was running through this morning, because she's just recently been in a movie called Good Luck to You, Leo Grand. She is a 60-something-year-old woman playing a 60-something-year-old woman who has hired a sex worker because never in her whole life has she experienced an orgasm. So that's the plot of the story. But what was fascinating to me about her, both in this story and in her real life, is that she's a beautiful woman who doesn't appear to hide her age. She's not caved into that pressure to do lots of facelifts. She shows up with gray hair. She's engaged, she's active, she's working, and she inspires sort of a confidence about where she is, and she's willing to talk about it. Jimmy Carter is another one. Now, he is truly what we would call an old guy. I mean, he's in his early 90s, wrinkled, age spots, looking frail, experiencing some of the things older people do, but he is as mentally alert as anybody. He works to build homes. He works to help in philanthropy. He teaches Sunday school. He's an example of someone who has not taken sort of a negative thought and spiraled down with it. And these are what Becca Levy calls internalized ageism. That idea that we think about our own selves negatively sometimes, as well as people outside. And what she discovered was that the single most important factor in determining someone's longevity didn't income, social standing, status, functional health, loneliness, none of that mattered as much as how these people thought about approaching old age. Age beliefs, it turns out, she says, can steal or add nearly 8 years to your life. So there's that emotional piece, that component of it, how we think about things impacts how we feel, but our emotional feelings also tie into our physical health. And all of those things combine to play into how long we will live our life. And so as an example, 2 years ago, I was suddenly diagnosed with a severe coronary artery disease and ended up, as a huge surprise to all of us, having to go and have a triple coronary bypass in the early days of COVID. So nobody in the hospital with me, nobody at home to take care of me. I live alone. And I managed it quite well. I was sent back to drive faster than they expected. I got into cardiac rehab faster. Everything healed quickly and fairly easily. And it was, I think, because I was in shape beforehand, and I walked while I was in the hospital before surgery, because they cocooned me in the hospital for several days. They would not let me go home until they could get the surgery. I was that close to risk. So 2 years later, I have a balance issue, which I think is partly connected, but I also have vertigo. So I was seeing a physical therapist, and the assistant had this walking exercise he wanted me to do, and painted on the gym floor was one of those things like a ladder. You know, I don't know if you've seen athletes practicing where you take a foot out and in and out and in, and you progress as you go down this ladder. It was meant to be agility. It was also to work on my balance. So Stephen shows me, and he goes, step out and then step in, step out, step in. So I do it, and then I put my foot out, and then I put my foot in, and then I put this one in and out. He looks, he doesn't say anything. And then a minute or two later, he shows me again, and he's jumping. He's like out, in, out, in, out, in, and he's just bouncing along. I couldn't do that. And what I realized that night when I started to think about it is that somewhere along the way, I had gotten, I'm 67. I broke a foot 10 years ago, but I'm pretty agile, and I go to the gym 3 times a week, and I'm fortunate to be in a place where I can move around like I want. But I had in my head somehow decided that moving was that I was fragile. I don't know. I can't really explain how it happened. And I realized I felt more grounded, not in the good sense, like tethered to the ground. Being light and taking a big step felt uncomfortable for me. And I had to sort of mentally think about making that switch. And I see that I could easily have gone to, oh my gosh, my balance is bad. I could fall sometimes. Maybe I better start being more careful. Maybe I better not move so fast, instead of deciding that I would practice it at home by myself, which I did. It hurt my knee, but I practiced it. And then I'm going to skip some this summer. I'm going to go outside and skip with my grandson, it's a real example, I think, of how we can take this thought and it can mushroom out of control if we're not real careful about it. And it was certainly what I caught in myself. And when we have these thoughts, when we have this notion, whether we're looking at someone else and when we're looking at someone else, we're usually applying that same stuff to ourselves. It does change how we feel. It does change how we act. And so the challenge is to start to rewrite that, to think about what you're saying and to catch yourself in the moment of saying it, which I think is key to me. And for all of us, awareness. I mean, we can't make a change in anything until we've become aware of what's going on, until we can go, oh, look at what I've done, and make that association. Because we've to kind of do it for ourselves, because we're not in a place in this country, I think, where there are as many age positive environments as we would like them to be. There are debates right now about whether some of the senators and representatives are just too old to be there. That seems based sort of on chronological age as opposed to capacity. There's a woman named Ashton Applewhite, and she has become somewhat of an aging expert across the world. And she has a website called This Chair Rocks. People send in a quote or an incident or something they've seen and said, is this ageist? And she unpacks it for them. She talks about why that particular comment is detrimental. And it's been kind of fascinating to listen to her. So if you have a chance to find her someplace, I would suggest you go listen and see what she's got to say. So how do we change ourselves? How do we decide we want to become, live more unapologetically, live with a certain freedom and tackle our own ageist beliefs? For me, it's rewriting the stories. Because I write, because I think in terms of stories, that's the way that it works for me. I journal every day. I sit in the same chair. I get up, I get a cup of coffee, I sit down, say pen, sand paper, and I write. Sometimes I write not much of anything. Sometimes something comes to mind and I find myself in the middle of a therapy session, and I'm grateful that I'm not spending money for it. I was going through my journals. I was skimming through about 1.5 years worth of journals and was looking for something that detailed to go on my story. And I realized that for a couple of months there, I had written, it was probably a dating situation. I made some foolish dating moves when I was a little bit younger, and I was like, why did I do this? And I keep seeing him and I know I really shouldn't do this and I need to do better than this. And then a couple of days later I would go, and I did it again. And I would berate myself. And I realized that over a period of months, I kept making the same mistake, criticizing myself for it, saying, I'm going to do better and not doing it. And it was sort of an astounding moment. I was almost in tears when I thought, look at you, just criticizing yourself, stuck in this place and not doing anything, playing the helpless person, playing the victim, playing the whatever. And so it was a chance for me to say, there is a different way to do this. Just as if we catch ourselves in the middle of a negative comment, we have that opportunity to go, oh, listen to what I'm doing and how can I change that? And so for me, it was literally trying to write it down. Instead of saying things like that, I began to write more positively. I began to say, okay, so I've done this thing. What might I do next time that would be different? And write into that, helping myself find ways out of it. And I think we do the same thing when we engage in a conversation about our creaky knees, or we share memes about old ladies, and we indulge in some of those things, or those moments when I sit in front of the too big magnifying mirror and examine my neck and go, oh gosh, look at that. It's kind of a fruitless thing because it's there. And what we do, I think, sometimes is we have bought into this expectation, whether it's a partner's, society, a group we're in, our upbringing, that there's a certain way we're supposed to show up. And then we get caught in that. And we live in a culture right now that wants us to be upset about getting older. They want us to be afraid. They make money off of that. You know, the ad marketing is huge, and the marketing for older adults is based on improvement. It's based on products. They estimate women are spending over $1 billion a year in trying products to make themselves feel, look, appear, act younger. And so we get caught in this, and it's natural. Just hop in a chat session in a Facebook group where people start talking about their neck wrinkles or their crepey skin, and that conversation takes off, and we pull it in, we take it into ourselves, and then we kind of fret about, well, gee, how am I meant to look? How am I meant to act? And I think that trickles down to everything that we do. So the question then becomes, how do I rewrite that story? How do I take charge of my narrative? And I've written down here, are you ready to transform yourself? And that maybe is not the right statement, because we're not trying to transform ourselves into something. We are trying to find comfort with who we are in the moment and embrace that, and then look at the possibilities to go from there. And again, it comes back to, what is it you desire? What would you like this stage of your life to look like? What specifically would you like? And so I would suggest that we don't need to do this right now, particularly, but I would suggest that you take a piece of paper and make this list of things. What are some things you would like to do? As simple as paint the bedroom purple, or my mother hated purple as a child, and I was always chastised. She wouldn't let me have anything that was purple because it was tacky. So when I go to naughty things, it's always paint something purple. Or like the time I was in camp, and they sold a Ritz dye at the camp, and I dyed all my underpants and all my undergarments or whatever. I dyed everything purple before I went home, and my mother was not very happy. But so I lost that train of thought. So what are things that you might want to do? So make a list. And then after you've done that, look at the list and see if there's some excuses about it. Is there a place where you say, well, I'm too old to do that? Or people my age don't do that kind of thing. Are there excuses that you're making that keep you from doing the things you want to do? Sometimes they're logistic things that keep us from doing things. Sometimes a corporate life means we have to show up a certain way in order to fight the idea that our age or our gray hair might imply we're less than. We may have various disabilities that keep us from participating in certain things. So there are some very real and important things that hold us back, but sometimes it's our own mind. It's our own fears at what we can or can't do. I spent a long time thinking that because I was single, it was fair because I hadn't remarried. Why couldn't I find a man? So there was this deep flaw there. But I also realized I was waiting for some man to show up, and then I would get a smaller house. I was waiting for some man to show up so I could go and do things, combined with that fret of, oh my God, I'm getting older. And every year that passes means I am less lovable, likable, capable, etc. And it was just a silly sort of spiral. And in 2017, a woman I was talking to on Facebook said, I go to Portugal every year for half the year. Why don't you come join me? I thought about it for a few days, and I thought, oh, why not? So I booked a plane for 2 weeks, and I booked 4 nights in Lisbon. And she and I made a plan that I would meet her, where she would come pick me up in the southern tip of the country where she was. And I went. No tour, no real guidelines. I don't speak Portuguese, But I knew that 3 hours down the road was somebody who would come get me if I needed her to, even though I'd never met her. I just trusted her. It was the most transforming thing I ever did. I was, that's 7 years ago, so I was 61. And it gave me an assurance about my ability to navigate my own internal world and the outer world. And it was a simple thing in a way, and yet it was a very daring thing. And my son didn't think I should go. One of my brothers seemed a little surprised. And, there were conversations about caution. And it was that moment for me of thinking, life, it gets to be defined in the way I want it. And it helped me see that I could do any number of things and that I could do them in the way that suited me. And I also realized that that brother over there who was censoring me wasn't living my life. And it was his own stuff around he thought how women should show up. And it didn't have anything to do with care for me or concern about how I was handling things. It was just a very gut reaction of, this is the where this woman is supposed to be. Older women don't do this. And so it was a help for me to sort of think about what I wanted to do. And I've talked to women who have fears about doing new things, older women, like, I can't go out to eat by myself. It looks like it's not a good thing to do, or, I would feel so awkward, or I'm uncertain of new terrain. And we break it down. What could you do that's small? Can you just go eat in the most comfortable place and take a book and sit in the corner? Or what are the small steps that we can take to allow us to lead up to the big things that we want? And whatever they may be. I mean, it may be that the most freeing thing we want to do right this minute is to change the color of our sofa, or decide that we will stop dyeing our hair, for example, or something small that says, this is what I want. I'm tired of sort of suiting other people, and this is how I get to show up. And I believe that when we make a decision about what we want, when we look in the mirror and say, I'm comfortable with who I am. I don't necessarily mean that in terms of facial looks, but just sort of saying, I'm happy in this place right now. I'm happy being retired. I'm happy living in this house. I'm happy being single, whatever. We begin to develop some confidence about who we are, because we've made the choice based on what we think we want and desire, not what we're being told to do. And I believe that that confidence makes us feel stronger when we begin to feel better about ourselves. And we walk out with what looks to the world as well, like confidence and self-assurance. And then that makes us feel a little more visible. And that comfort cycle builds as we take on those things. And it's really down to, I think, deciding what it is we want to do and writing that narrative differently. So, this would be my sort of kind of ending statement. Wouldn't it be good to have a more hopeful, positive take on your life? Wouldn't it be nice to let go of some of the fears and worries around things that you can't do anything about, in essence? I mean, really, some of these things, we just can't do it. We are the age we are, we're moving forward. And the idea of letting go of some of those old patterns, examining them, why you have them if you want to, but sometimes it's just as simple as saying, this is where I choose to go now, and whatever that might look like, small or big. And for me, it's been small, little things, like the decision that I didn't have to keep frenetically looking for a husband. I have a lover. He comes over twice a week. He cooks sometimes. I cook sometimes. Couldn't be better. He goes home. He sleeps in his own bed. I've got just what I want there. Now, there are people who think that's a shame I can't find a husband. And it's kind of like, well, I've done what I wanted. I've decided to start, I don't hide my scar. I have a 9-inch scar here. I don't hide my scar. I'm not going to bundle up for the rest of my life. I go where I want to go for the most part. I've abandoned some of the more nice pieces of my life. I'm a nice person, but nice in terms of needing to impress, needing to be, polite, compliant. I say what I want to say. I made someone very uncomfortable a couple of weeks ago. He asked me what I did. So I told him, and a woman across the table said, he gets really uncomfortable. And I said to her later, I said, he'll have to work on how he handles things like that, because it's no longer my job to make someone at the table comfortable with what I need to say. And I didn't get that when I was 30, but I fully get that now. Now, I'm not rude. I didn't really intend to embarrass him. I wasn't staring at him to see that he was uncomfortable. But he needs to learn, in my mind, that women can say what they want to say. And, it's just one of those things. But these are the ways that I'm choosing to do it. And it may be more radical than makes you comfortable, but I urge you to kind of sit down and think about some of the patterns, to come up with, are there one or two things that I'm doing that I could let go of? Are there one or two things I'd like to embrace, whatever that might be, that would feel different and better for me, and move towards that. So thank you for letting me just go on and on and on. We'll have some conversation. It says thank you under there. I can see your faces and they're hiding the thank you. My contact information is here for you. And as Elaine said, I have a gift for you, which is a chapter from the book, Inviting Desire. And while the book is about helping women sort of embrace their sexuality, this is chapter 5, which is entitled Self-Affirmation. And they're short chapters with a couple of pages of thoughts and ideas, and then some simple assignments. And the idea around self-affirmation or self-care is that we are better situated to come into a relationship or an intimate relationship when we understand our own needs, when we know how to speak up for ourselves, and we know how to take care of ourselves. And that process of affirming who we are and putting ourselves as important as, if not more important, in relationships. And I believe all of that applies to aging, looking at who we are, what do we need right now? And so I want you to know that just because the book is around sex, that the chapter is not. So the link is here.
I put it in the chat also,
Got it.
Walker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's there for you. And I hope you'll take a look and play with some of the exercises. It's all light and simple.